in this lesson, we'll take a look at using file textures and how they relate a little bit more closely to our UVs. So I just wanted to give you an idea of how the painted file texture would relate to something with UVs. So in this case, we've got the grill here, and right now it has that chrome shader on it, so the DGS material. Let's actually make a copy of that. So let's duplicate shading network, and then we'll just call this something like grill DGS. Okay, now let's apply it to our grill, and let's go ahead and just do a quick render, and just to confirm that it does have that material on there. Okay, so it's that sort of shiny chrome. Now let's say we want to incorporate a painted file texture into the color. And so what we'll do is I'm just going to go ahead and pipe it into the diffuse. Okay, normally you'd pipe this into the color, or sometimes it's called diffuse if you had a typical material, but I'm just going to use this in the diffuse because I just want to kind of break up this detail here with a painted texture. So in the diffuse, we'll go ahead and pipe that in, and we want to choose file. And again, this is going to allow us to bring in an external file. So we'll open that up, and I want to choose the grill color, which is just the series of it's a black with some gray stripes on it. So we'll go ahead and load that up into our view, and then we can see what that looks like. We have the ability down here to change things a little bit. We can kind of change the color gain if we want to kind of take it down a little bit. And so there are some options. We can also invert under effects. We can invert the file texture. But let's take a look at this. So now we've got that file texture added, and you can actually see it in our viewport. You can kind of see that this has the black and actually the gray stripes on it. Let's see what that looks like in our UV texture editor and how that relates. So here you can see that our UVs actually match up. The UVs that I've done actually match up with the file texture. If you hit this little button here, you can toggle the ability to see the background texture. Okay, and so looking at this, you can think of this as a 2D image that has been created in something like Photoshop or another image editing application, and this can be used to paint faces, characters, paint clothing, anything you want. You can use whatever techniques you can. This is probably the simplest you can get. It's just a few stripes here on a black background, but it's not something that we would get with a procedural map. It's something that we would have to go in and paint ourselves. Things like any kind of painted texture that you'd want to create, typically you can't really get that nice of an effect with a procedural node, although at the end of this section we'll look at something that will allow you to get pretty close. So what we can do here is if we take a look at this, you can see that actually I've put the bottom of it is up here, and so this really closely relates to how this is being applied to the UVs. Okay, so this polygon here is this polygon here, and then this one is this one. So if I were to now take these UVs and pull those out, you can see that the black gap is getting bigger because it's getting bigger here. Okay, we're stretching those polygons out, so now this gray is only taking up half the polygon. The polygon itself in the 3D model has not changed size at all. It's just how that texture information is being transferred onto it. If we were to pull it back in, you can see again the polygon's not changing size, but by changing the UVs, I can take that gray all the way to the edge. And it's very clear in our UV texture editor where the edge of that polygon is, and the fact that the gray is going all the way past the edge, and that's visible here as well. So hopefully you can get a little bit of kind of a better idea of how that works. Okay, and so usually the workflow would be to lay out your UVs in this 0 to 1 square. And sometimes you can use multiple tiles too, but that's another story. But typically you lay your UVs out flat in a square, pieces like this, and then what you can do is actually take a UV snapshot, and you can save out an image of your UVs and then use that to actually paint. So in this case, we could choose the image size. So let's say 1024, make that a JPEG. We wanted the UV range to be what we currently have. And so we'll say OK to that, and it says it's saved out this file. So now let's jump over to Photoshop and just take a quick look at that. So if we jump into our project files, it's in the images directory of your texturing Maya project, and we go ahead and open that up, we'll be able to see you can actually get an image of your UVs. So in this case, we could come in and we could select this and cut and paste it, and then we could come in and let's actually screen it. And if we fill this with black, we'll actually be able to see this much better. So fill the base with black, and then we could come in with paint or a shape. Let's get kind of a gray color, and we can create a new layer, drop it between our UV layout, and then we can start to paint based on the UV. So this will allow us to know exactly what part of our model is going to be receiving the paint. So we could come in and paint some gray stripes on here based on the UVs. Okay. Now after the fact, you can always come back in, you save your texture out and load it up just as we did. After the fact, you can always come in and modify the UVs as well. You can see, as we did here, taking these UVs and tweaking those. But it's a really nice way to work. There are also other applications that will allow you to paint in 3D on your model. So things like ZBrush, Mudbox, Mari, programs like that will allow you to do that. Typically, you'll need to have UVs, though, if you want to have textures. In the most cases, there's a PTEX functionality which will allow you to take it all the way through render, but most of the time you'll want to have UVs on your polygons if you're going to be creating texture maps so that it knows how to apply those to your model. Okay, so that's just a quick look at file textures themselves. Let's go ahead and smooth this out, and let's take another render and see if the file texture added anything to our scene. So you can see that we've got the diffuse added in, but I really want to kind of take this down. So let's go ahead and tweak this a little bit. Let's use our IPR render. And let me go into the Hypershade. And I want to get the new DGS material that we had. So it's going to be right here. And so we can try to manipulate the glossy and specular. Let's see what happens if we go into our node editor, and let's actually want to graph, actually select this object, and we'll graph materials viewport selection. All right, and let's see what happens when we pipe this into another element here. So let me go ahead and open up our DGS. Okay, so right now we have the out color going to diffuse, out alpha going to diffuse A. Let's start to take our color into something like the glossy. And there you can see that it's now modifying the glossiness of that. Okay, if we delete that, we can now take it to the shininess. Or the speculars, where we want to actually go. And so you can see that it's made that much more specular. So that allows us to make that a little bit more intense. Okay, so you can play around with the connections that you have there in order to get this. Now, working with the DGS is a little bit different because we have just a few options. If you're working with a typical material, you could pipe that into the diffuse color or into the incandescence if it's something glowing, or into the bump perhaps, and things like that. So make sure to check that out when you're working with this. Okay, and the node editor is going to come in handy when you're doing that as well. All right, now you can see up here that we have a little bit of an issue, and so I just want to come in and fix that just by tweaking those points a little bit. Take this point up and maybe bring this point down a little bit, and then in our UV texture editor you can select those points and they'll kind of show you where those are. Okay, and then we can come in and select those and just do an unfold. And that kind of cleans that up a little bit. Okay, so again, working with file textures here in Maya 2013. Now, the way that we've been applying our file textures up to this point has been just based on the UV map, but we can also project them in different ways onto objects. So it doesn't have to be, laying them out on a certain object. We can actually add things like decals and logos and things. And so let's go ahead and take a look at how we can do that in the next lesson.